I saw my dad propose to my girlfriend. We never wanted you to find out like this, they stammered. I just turned and left. A month later, when they finally reached out, their perfect life was in ruins after what I did next. I never thought I'd be writing this, but I need to get this off my chest. What happened a month ago changed everything, and honestly, I'm still processing it all. I was supposed to meet my girlfriend Sarah at this upscale restaurant downtown. We'd been together for 2 years, and things were getting serious. At least, I thought they were. I'd been planning to propose to her myself in a few weeks, had the ring picked out, and everything. I arrived early and decided to wait in the parking lot, scrolling through my phone. That's when I saw my dad's car pull up. I thought it was weird, what were the odds? But then I saw Sarah get out of the passenger seat. My stomach dropped, but I told myself there had to be an explanation. Maybe she'd run into him somewhere, and he'd given her a ride. I watched them walk into the restaurant together, and something felt off about their body language. They seemed too comfortable, too familiar. I sat there for another 10 minutes, trying to convince myself I was being paranoid. Finally, I decided to go inside and surprise them with some innocent explanation for why they were together. I walked in and asked the hostess if she'd seen a man in his 50s with a younger woman. She pointed toward the back corner, mentioning they'd requested a private booth. My heart was already racing as I made my way over. What I saw will be burned into my memory forever. My dad was down on one knee, holding a ring box, and Sarah had her hands over her mouth in that classic proposal pose. The whole restaurant was watching, some people even clapping. I stood there frozen, watching my father propose to my girlfriend. Sarah spotted me first. The color drained from her face completely. My dad followed her gaze and saw me standing there. He slowly got up, still holding the ring box, and I watched both of them realize their perfect moment had just turned into their worst nightmare. They both started talking at once, trying to explain. My dad kept saying they never wanted me to find out like this, that they'd been trying to figure out how to tell me. Sarah was crying, reaching for my arm, telling me she was sorry, that it just happened. I didn't say a word. I just turned around and walked out. I could hear them calling my name behind me, but I kept walking. I got in my car and drove home in complete silence. I think I was in shock. The next few days were a blur. They both called constantly. My dad showed up at my apartment twice, but I wouldn't answer the door. Sarah sent me long texts explaining how they'd met at my birthday party 6 months ago, how they'd connected over their shared love of hiking, how they'd tried to fight their feelings but couldn't. Reading those texts made me physically sick. My own father and my girlfriend had been carrying on behind my back for months. Every family dinner, every time the three of us hung out together, they'd been lying to my face. After a week of radio silence from me, they seemed to give up trying to contact me directly. But I knew they were still together because Sarah posted a photo of her engagement ring on social media. She'd blocked me, but mutual friends were sending me screenshots. The comments were full of congratulations from people who had no idea what had really happened. That's when I decided they needed to face some consequences. I started with Sarah's job. She worked as a marketing coordinator at a mid-sized company that prided itself on family values. I'd met her boss several times at company events, and he'd always made a point of talking about how important character and integrity were to their organization. I created a detailed timeline of Sarah's relationship with my father, including screenshots of our text conversations where she'd told me she loved me just days before getting engaged to him. I compiled photos of the three of us together at family events, showing how she'd been deceiving both of us. Then I sent it all to her HR department with a carefully worded email about how I thought they should know about their employee's character. I didn't lie about anything. I just presented the facts and let them draw their own conclusions about whether someone who could carry on a secret relationship with her boyfriend's father was the kind of person they wanted representing their company. The response was swift. Sarah was called into a meeting with HR and her boss within 2 days. Apparently, the company had a morality clause in their employee handbook, and they decided her actions reflected poorly on their values. She was terminated immediately. Next, I focused on my father. He was a respected member of our community, involved in local politics and charity work. He sat on the board of directors for a nonprofit that helped underprivileged kids, and he was always talking about being a role model. I reached out to several board members, people I'd known since I was a kid. I told them what had happened, how my father had been secretly dating my girlfriend and had proposed to her without ever telling me. I explained how betrayed I felt and how I questioned whether someone who could deceive his own son was the kind of person who should be in a leadership position with an organization focused on helping children. Word spread quickly through their social circle. My father started getting calls from concerned board members asking if the rumors were true. When he couldn't deny it, they asked for his resignation. He tried to explain that his personal life shouldn't affect his volunteer work, but the damage was done. The organization's reputation was too important to risk. But I wasn't finished. My father had always been proud of his standing in the community. He was a regular at the country club, played golf with local business owners, and had built his reputation over decades. I knew that reputation mattered more to him than almost anything else. I started reaching out to people in his social circle, not to spread gossip, but to share my story. I told them how hurt I was, how I'd lost both my girlfriend and my father in one devastating moment. I didn't have to embellish anything. The truth was shocking enough. The story spread like wildfire. People started talking, and not in a good way. My father's golf buddies began avoiding him. Invitations to social events stopped coming. The respect he'd spent years building evaporated almost overnight. Sarah's situation got worse too. Word about why she'd been fired spread through her professional network. She'd been looking for a new job, but every interview seemed to go nowhere. I suspected potential employers were doing their due diligence and discovering the circumstances of her termination. 3 weeks after I'd started my campaign, I heard through a mutual friend that Sarah and my father were having problems. The stress of everything falling apart around them was taking its toll on their relationship. They were arguing constantly, blaming each other for the mess they'd created. Sarah had moved in with my father after losing her job, but being together 24/7 while dealing with the fallout from their actions was straining their supposedly perfect love. She was bitter about losing her career, and he was angry about losing his reputation. The fairy tale romance they'd thought was worth destroying our family over was crumbling under pressure. Update 1. A month after that restaurant scene, they finally reached out together. My father called and asked if we could meet to talk. He sounded different, defeated, tired. I agreed to meet them at a coffee shop, curious to see what they had to say. They looked terrible. My father had aged years in just a month, and Sarah looked like she'd been crying for weeks. They sat across from me, holding hands but looking miserable. My father started by apologizing. He said he knew what they'd done was wrong, that he'd betrayed me in the worst possible way. He tried to explain that he'd never meant for it to happen, that he'd fought his feelings for Sarah but ultimately couldn't resist them. Sarah jumped in, telling me she was sorry for hurting me, that she'd never wanted things to end up this way. She said she genuinely cared about me, but that what she felt for my father was different, stronger. Then they got to the real reason for the meeting. They wanted to know if I was behind everything that had been happening to them. My father asked directly if I'd contacted his board members and his friends. Sarah wanted to know if I'd sent information to her former employer. I didn't deny it. I told them that actions have consequences, and they were finally facing theirs. I explained that I hadn't lied about anything or made up stories. I'd simply shared the truth about what they'd done. My father got angry then, saying I was being vindictive and cruel. He accused me of ruining their lives out of spite. Sarah started crying, talking about how she couldn't find work and how people were treating her like a pariah. I listened to them complain about the consequences of their own choices, and I felt nothing. No sympathy, no regret, no satisfaction. Just emptiness. I told them they'd made their choice when they decided to betray me. They'd chosen each other over honesty, over family, over basic decency. Now they were living with that choice. My father tried a different approach, appealing to our relationship as father and son. He said he loved me and wanted to find a way to repair our family. Sarah nodded along, saying she hoped we could all find a way to move forward. But I was done. I told them there was no moving forward, no repairing what they'd broken. They'd shown me exactly who they were, and I believed them. I stood up to leave, and my father grabbed my arm. He looked desperate, asking what it would take for me to forgive them, to stop what I was doing to their lives. I looked at both of them and realized they still didn't get it. They were sorry they'd been caught, sorry they were facing consequences, but they weren't actually sorry for what they'd done. If they could go back and handle the situation differently, maybe tell me before getting engaged, maybe wait a respectable amount of time, they'd still choose each other over me. I told them that and walked away. That was 6 weeks ago, and I haven't heard from them since. Update 2. 2 months later, I heard through the grapevine that Sarah and my father had broken up. Apparently, the pressure of their ruined lives had been too much for their great love story. Sarah had moved back in with her parents in another state, and my father was living alone in the house where I'd grown up. A mutual friend told me my father had been asking about me, wondering how I was doing. He'd apparently told people he regretted everything and wished he could take it all back. But he'd never reached out to me directly. I'd started therapy by then, trying to process everything that had happened. My therapist helped me understand that my response to their betrayal had been about reclaiming some sense of control and justice in a situation where I'd been completely powerless. She also helped me realize that while my actions had been understandable, they'd also been consuming me. I'd spent months focused on making them pay for what they'd done, and in the process, I'd put my own healing on hold. I started focusing on rebuilding my life instead of tearing down theirs. I threw myself into work, reconnected with friends I'd neglected, and even started dating again. Slowly, I began to feel like myself again. The truth is, I don't regret what I did. They betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible, and they deserve to face consequences for their actions. But I also realized that continuing to focus on punishing them was only hurting me in the long run. I've moved on with my life, and I'm genuinely happy now. I'm in a relationship with someone who actually respects me and our relationship. I've built a career I'm proud of and surrounded myself with people who value honesty and loyalty. My father and Sarah made their choice that night in the restaurant. They chose a moment of passion over years of trust and family bonds. They got what they wanted, each other, but they also got everything that came with it. I made my choice too. I chose to show them that actions have consequences, that betrayal comes with a price. I chose to prioritize my own dignity and self-respect over maintaining relationships with people who'd proven they couldn't be trusted. Looking back, I think we all got exactly what we deserved. They got their love story and all the complications that came with it. I got my freedom from people who'd shown me their true character. Sometimes I wonder if my father ever thinks about what he lost when he chose Sarah over his relationship with his son. Sometimes I wonder if Sarah ever regrets throwing away her career and her reputation for a relationship that couldn't survive the pressure of its own foundation. But mostly, I don't think about them at all anymore. I've built a new life, one based on honesty and mutual respect. And that's worth more than any relationship built on lies and betrayal ever could be. The last I heard, my father was still alone, and Sarah was working at a retail job in her hometown. Their perfect love story had a very imperfect ending. But that's what happens when you build something beautiful on a foundation of deception and betrayal. I'm at peace with how everything turned out. They made their choices, I made mine, and we're all living with the consequences. That's how life works. Actions have results. And sometimes those results are exactly what people deserve.